The image in the thumbnail is something I saw a long, long time ago. I'd like to say early 2020s-ish. I saw it on Telegram around the time I was about to get off of it. I don't believe I had it in mind when I saw this post, but this was shortly before then. For anyone with even the slightest dog whistle sense or familiarity with like the neo folk sphere, you can probably tell from this image that back in those days I was not so cool. And I'll just be frank with you, I was a fascist. Specifically, if I had to describe it, it would be a sort of post. Okay, I was always a little bit on the progressive side with this, but I'd call it a bit of a post gender, but definitely not post racial sort of fascism. I didn't care so much about how people did stuff, but I cared what got done and what color they were. Of course, back then I would have been like, oh, it's skull shape and hormones and shit too. Bullshit. But that's what I would have said. I'm not getting into that stuff here because obviously it took me years to get out of it, and I have a fucking education in biology for fuck's sake, so I'm not going to take the time out of my day to try to help you if you're having a problem understanding that. Depends who you are. But, oh, hi, hello, thanks for stopping by. Kind of a rude introduction, but when earlier I said post gender in my analysis of how I used to be, to be specific, that's not what I'd actually say. It would be post-sexual, because I most certainly did not happen to be a trans rights supporter. Of course, shocking, I know. Okay, I know you want to remind me of those weird like trans Nazi memes from back then or whatever, but listen, okay, that shit is fucking. That is not a significant portion of people. I'll give you that. That was weird though. It's almost like a lot of those people are closeted. Weird. Anyways, at the time that I saw this image, I was coming to terms with the fact that I've already had known for a long time that I was bisexual because, well, at this particular moment, it was no longer something where I could just take the old Roman approach and be like, hey, as long as I'm a top and have a family with a woman, it's okay. Who cares? Because, well, fate kind of decided to play a prank on me. The kind of prank that's actually good for your character development, not like an accident. In any case, it thought I could use a little mix up, and I was falling in love with a guy at this time. My current boyfriend, years later, who I'm about to be moving in with. It's been a stupidly long journey to get here, and we've been through so much, and it's been so fucking shitty and painful at times. Not because of either one of us, but just, how life is. But I'm really proud to be where I am now. So, what the fuck is up with the title? And if my sexuality didn't necessarily come into direct conflict with what I viewed before, what changed exactly? The answer really is centered on the difference between what pride meant before and after, and also how I viewed just myself in relation to other people. Before, I could never have known that there was a different feeling of pride. I couldn't have known because I had never felt anything different from what I knew before. I wouldn't say that like personal pride over personal accomplishments really acts as much of a third category. It tends to be filtered through how you process pride in general, in my experience. And the thing that a lot of nationalists share in common is that their pride is filtered through this abstract conception of past glories that lead up to you, which is supposed to make you feel prideful, but what it does is instead of just letting you feel pride in a neutral state, it necessitates obligation and guilt, very similar to in religious dynamics. And mind you, of course, I was a pretty confident person growing up. I mean, I had the whole pass for being bi just as long as I didn't, like skip out on my responsibilities or anything. And of course, everyone's a little bit inadequate feeling sometimes, but I was overall about as confident as you could be in this day and age. I was pretty chill. But what this pride does is even if you're a really confident brave, nice guy. It's in those weak moments where it gives you an excuse to lash out because it tells you that your confidence in committing violence is what will actually protect everything you care about. Don't actually stop to think about it, just do it. And when I was in at the time, we often thought of ourselves as, of course, a bunch of free thinkers or whatnot. It's ironic, I know, but the idea is, of course, it's always phrased as, oh, all this thinking just slows you down when if you don't do something right now, you'll freaking die. Which, last I checked, trying to give yourself OCD was not exactly on anyone's wish list, but sure. And in my family, along the male line, we were very honed in discipline. I'm not sure how many people would actually, who knew me back then, would compliment me in this category, but I knew. I mean, I definitely had my moments in public that people saw, but it's discipline isn't just not doing what you want. It's genuinely a kind of form of, um, again, it's a form of weakness. It can be. Something that Protestant Americans are not at all ready to hear is that no, discipline is not a good in and of itself, it's a tool. And if you are too well trained in a tool, you will always go to it. And for me growing up, discipline was my binky. I would go to it so I didn't have to think about what I was doing. And as a result, I've taken a lot of life. Thankfully, no human life that I'm aware of, but I certainly have hurt people bad enough where I do have reason to be concerned about that. And that is not something that should be on anyone's mind. And that is what happens when you indulge in the what I can only call the masturbation of discipline. To this day, I'm left struggling with actually trying to not do things that I don't want to do. It's actually stupidly difficult not to just try and not do something just because I know I'll hate it. It's difficult. It's very difficult. And even beyond then, in neutral contexts, I just don't say no to things because I'm used to just working. That's what I do. It's not fun, really. And the parts of it that you don't really see, that people in their boxed up minds will not usually classify as discipline, is the things you do to yourself that are not really what anyone else is even asking you to do. Like, I used to regularly go between, episodes of just all kinds of different self harm, usually roundabout kind of stuff. I would do blunt force trauma to my bones and convince myself that it's turning me into a stronger man when, I wasn't even admitting to myself why I wanted to do it. Um, I would regularly go between starving myself and then eating way too freaking much because we all know that, having a bad relationship with food is the best way to be disciplined, just fast for 16 hours on the hashtag warrior diet and, just, yeah, just be proud of it. Even if you fall into it on accident, just fucking be proud of it, whatever. You'll notice how a lot of this stuff, when I mention pride, it's very voluntary discipline. This is not stuff being done by people out of necessity, although working class people can absolutely participate in this, don't get me wrong. But this kind of faux manliness really strongly appeals to the middle class. A lot. That's right, William Luther Pierce, you were dead wrong. Well, that's no one's going to get that. But I, again, was pretty, secure in my masculinity. I always had this kind of, for me, it was always an emphasis on the independent action part of being a man, which was a good thing because it kept me from participating in a lot of the worst behaviors. So I was overall pretty wizard pilled, as they might say. Always wanted to go for that mage hermit lifestyle. So what is it that keeps you in this stuff? If you're not even that insecure, if you seem like a confident guy, if literally just by talking to you people go, "Oh, this fascism stuff doesn't seem that bad." What drives someone like that to be a part of this? And well, I was that guy, so I'll tell you. It all boils down to a feeling of obligation. It genuinely feels intuitive that life is all about making babies. That the only way for the people you love and care about to have immortality or experience immortality is through them having grandchildren and great grandchildren and babies, so on and so on. And it was an obligation. So in the end, it was emotion that drove me and everyone else into it. It does not matter how like absolutely elaborate or stupid a fascist's arguments are. That's not how they got there in the first place. I was an incredibly intelligent one. I was the philosopher of the groups. Um, second only to my dad, who genuinely a really smart guy. It's it's genuinely you just can't be reasoned out of it. I'm sure you've heard that before. And I had been graduated from college for a while before I got out of this stuff. So no, you can't say it was because I was brainwashed. If anyone is actually getting brainwashed by American colleges, um, in my humble opinion, they literally just are into the aesthetics and they're a turncoat that I wouldn't trust to flush a damn toilet. They'll be a communist and then a fucking anarcho-capitalist and then like a centrist within like a week. I don't really care what they think at all. So let's get back to us serious people. What changed? How did I change my mind? And it's not something I can just describe in one go, but I'll try to list a couple of the things that were happening at the same time. But first of all, of course, I was falling in love at the time slowly. It wouldn't be a full on crush till a little bit later, but I was, I couldn't ignore it that the group of people I cared about was no longer the small sheltered community that I'd always known, but that I just actually really fucking cared about someone who everyone was saying was disgusting. And I couldn't fucking tolerate that shit. And I don't actually look at it this way, but for anyone else who needs a description of this, and if you're just a normal person, um, it was just in my body as a fucking man that I could not tolerate or be a part of that kind of harm anymore when I had someone I genuinely needed to be there for. So there was the emotional part solved. This is not something that you can just do for somebody. You can't just talk someone out of this. They kind of have to fall into this. And that's what happened to me is I was forced out of my shell by just a different obligation, one that overrode the one that clearly was so fucking hollow because the moment that a real genuine emergency and urgency came about, the other bullshit, it just fucked right off because it was, shallow and not very well thought out. Well, okay. I should mediate what I'm saying. It was hard. It took a long time to get over those feelings. I felt guilt for what felt like giving up on those obligations for a long time. The reality, of course, is that no obligations were ever left behind. I still care for and try my best to take care of everyone that I care about. I just, changed my perspective on what that meant, how to take care of the people I care about. But it does, when you let go of something like that, it can feel you can feel very guilty, um, and ashamed as well. Thankfully for me, the shame phase didn't last long because, of course, I've always been pretty confident in myself. So, well, I guess if you actually knew me in real life, you might not agree with that. But at the very least, it was mostly guilt and not shame, which helped a lot. The other aspect that pushed me out was actually just letting my actual interest and passion for biology actually have the wheel for a change instead of what I wanted it to look like. And before, what used to happen would be, of course, I would expand my knowledge, and when it came to everything else, I could apply it just fine, but when it came to humans, somehow it always came out as some kind of bizarre theory with no basis in anything, which I was aware of, but among fascists, there's this culture of esoteric knowledge and like, oh, I dreamed it one time. And if you think I'm exaggerating or you think I'm talking too much shit, actually just screw you. That's just how it is. Well, okay, if you didn't know, don't screw you. You're not screwed if you didn't know that. Sorry. But everyone else, if you're in that shit and you're just gonna be like, oh no, I don't fucking care, dude. Go take your shitty opinion somewhere else. Don't care. Anyways, there is this common misconception that I like to address that reproduction is the main part of how a species carries on. It's how you gain immortality. It's like the most important thing. First of all, humans are a sexually reproducing species. Dozens of generations from now, the chances that it will be your DNA in any living human are next to none. It will be a small, randomly selected handful of people whose genes happen by chance to make it there. Obviously, if you have no kids, you would like to think, oh, then my chances are just zero anyways. The thing is that the people you're related to also have those same genes. That's just how gene pools work. So it's just kind of the same whether you do it or not. And so there's really no reason to be picky about it in a random distribution of people reproducing. It's just things will pretty much proceed the same. Now, some people would argue that this does not really counter the racial argument because, sure, this could apply within a race, but then those other people, they're stinky and they're not the same. Um, I hate to tell you this, but no, they don't have different fucking bones. They don't have different. Okay, so like the distribution of shapes is different across the continents, right? But humans have not been around that long, and you will notice the exact same shapes from like your relatives, from your local townspeople. Just because they're more frequent or one place or another, they are not a different species. This is the thing that seems to blow people's minds. And again, I'm saying this as like kind of a conciliatory argument. The changes we're talking about are minimal. The human mind is evolved to detect the slightest differences in the face and the skin of another person, and so someone's nose is slightly flatter, and that's more likely to happen in some places than others. But guess what? Everyone has it. You just can't see it because some of them come from a different culture than you. Shocking. A lot of people have misidentified my heritage as English, even though I am German Polish, and a lot of people have said that my dad looks like before he had like his when he was younger, I should say, before he was like had a lot more facial hair. They used to say that he looked like a Native American because he had a slender nose and slender eyes. Um, Point is that if you think you can identify races by sight, you're just actually delusional. And I shouldn't have to make that point. I hope we're good on that. Are we done here? I hope we're done here. So, when I came to accept all this stuff, which by the way is not a fast process like I'm making it sound, this was a long time of guilt. You know, you spend a lot of time attached to these ideas, and, you know, it genuinely is wrapped up in how you feel about your family and how much you care about them. It's hard to let go of. But once it's gone, what are we left with exactly? Especially since I haven't even mentioned the word once, which is just absolutely shameful in a video with this title. Where are we queer people left when a lot of us, especially with things like fucking IVF and adoption being taken off the table, where do we come into the picture of family and community when these things aren't there anymore? That's where I like to think the history I have that I very indulgently spoke at length about earlier, even though it was probably very unnecessary, uh, where I like to think that comes in handy because I think we all feel very lost when we are so outcast and rejected from what is normally considered a productive member of society, which of course is an abstraction from what it actually means to be human, which is to be proud of surviving, not to be proud of some abstraction of glory or immortality, some bullshit that only exists when it's written down in a book and never actually exists in our lives, only ever being more of an enigma that we can conjure in our heads to make ourselves feel better. What is it that makes being human like something to be proud of? Surviving. It's not easy to survive on this planet. It's really not. And that's the difference between white pride and gay pride. It is, oh, I shouldn't say gay pride, LGBT. I don't care. I use just gay as a catch-all. Also queer. In fact, I should have just said queer. Whatever. Queer pride. Why is it different? White pride is an indulgence. It is a making up for inadequacy. It is a ritual to conjure violence. Gay pride is about survival. Queer pride is about, despite everything that has actually been against us, never giving up and always trying to pass down our history to the next generation to tell them that things are going to be okay and that they do something for their family and for the people around them that matters just as much as everyone else's contribution. I mean, for fuck's sake, people still do not acknowledge a housewife's labor as a form of labor. They just see it as something they're obliged to receive. It's it's kind of fucking not exact. I really don't think we should trust what the state and the state culture tells us about production to tell us queer people what it means to be a good member of society. Because if women doing hard ass work don't count, then nobody fucking counts, apparently. So, yeah, in any case, I'm sorry that this video you might have thought would be a little more lighthearted or something. Well, from that title, I don't know. But you might have thought I might have actually spent more time talking about gay people. I'm sorry that this turned out to be some, self indulgent storytelling, but in the end, though, this still is, I guess, my little part I want to play. I just want to put it out there to say that you can come back from the worst things, and it genuinely is fucking wonderful to just be queer. It really is. Um, I, I really don't know how I could still be here without it, and you should be proud. It is something we need to show people, to normalize, to get back out on the streets, because this shit, we can't let this come back. For too long, people focused on, there was this kind of chill consensus after the 90s. Well, at least in appearance, not in actuality, but in appearance, there's this sort of chill equilibrium. And so people felt like, maybe the next step was just to nitpick how people talked and microaggressions and things. But here we are now. And this shit needs to be taken seriously for the deeply systemic and personal issue that it is. This is a personal issue for the world. This is something that is a worldwide inherited trauma that needs to be dealt with. And as queer people, we have an obligation to our straight friends and family to do our best to make this world more open for them too. That doesn't mean bending over backwards for people who absolutely fucking hate you and will never change their mind, but the fact is that everyone is a deviant in some way or not, whether they want to admit it or not. Everyone is disabled in a way that they're not technically allowed to be, or they have feelings they're technically not allowed to have. Just stupid, innocent shit. Not even just innocent, but healthy variation in a healthy species being eradicated. I mean, we are often accused of somehow being the death of the species for some fucking reason, as if, bonding between humans is somehow, in some way, very contrary to our survival. I don't know how that's supposed to work, but um, if you abstract enough, anything's possible. And apparently, they made it sound like people bonding and being social is bad for survival, which is really not surprising coming from the people who wish that they didn't need anyone else's help and they could just live on their own and be all big and alpha or whatever. So, yeah, not shocking. But newsflash to everyone, you don't get to choose the fact that you're part of a social species. If you're lucky enough, maybe you're like an aromantic uh, person who just does not really need much contact with anyone. That's about the best you can ask for if you really want to be a loner. But we are a social species. That's a fact. We exist relative to each other. And they say that we are causing a problem for the distant future, as though we're indulging in something, when being ourselves is that healthy promotion of variation this species needs. The more they cut out variation, the more likely we are to fail in the future. This is already something that is observed to happen. We know it's happened in the past, distant past, recent past. We know it would happen to us. Right now, there are species going extinct on this planet that previously were doing okay, that they were kind of holding on. Why? Because slowly, after generations of death, they've been able to hold a population, they've been able to stay at least stagnant, but they're losing the variation they need to adapt to all of the constant changes happening in this era of life's history. And so they just can't adapt anymore. Their genetic variety has been exhausted. And we do this to ourselves on purpose. The only reason we haven't died yet is because we have the technology and there's so goddamn many of us that we have a pretty strong shield, but it'll run out. And the more we do this, the more we allow this to continue, there's a time limit on how long we can be like this. That's why we need pride. We can't keep allowing people to live in shells and be sheltered from the reality of how human beings are. We can't tolerate intolerance any longer. So, and I say this as someone who was that person at some point, a young kid born into this stuff. I was never converted. I'm at least proud to say that. I was born into it. So, I mean, I still had an obligation to get out, but at least I didn't do the first part. So, I feel a little better about that. But I remember being that kid. I was just a young, innocent kid. Innocent in the sense that I didn't know any better. Not that I was innocent at all. Oh, fuck no. I knew and did the worst shit. Um, these people need to be shamed. I'm saying that as someone who was one. They need to be shamed. It is the only way. We are a social species, and they need to understand that there are consequences for this. That you and everyone who is allied with you does not want anything to do with people who clearly do not want to live on this planet with anyone else. If they don't want to live with anyone else, and that anyone else they're talking about is the entire fucking population of the Earth that they just can't seem to tolerate because they're just so fucking absolutely misanthropic. If you cannot stand living on this earth with anyone who isn't like you, why should we be expected to want to live with you? And the important thing to remember about this is that pride also is not about punishment. That is what white pride is about. It's about punishing both the white people for not daring to do enough to stave off some imaginary threat, and it's also punishment on colored people and minorities in general for just existing. It's all about punishment for the past and for just existing. Pride is about just existing as we are. There's no punishment involved. Straight people don't get punished for crimes of the past or things that their ancestors did. It's about just living as we are, about making right now the justice we wish we could have seen, and making people aware how what happened before is still part of them and still part of what they are doing today. That's what it's about. It's not punishment, it's correction. And there's no reason to be snarky about it. In fact, if you are really trying to avoid being snarky about it, just be fucking honest about it. Don't be correcting little tiny mistakes. If you're going to talk to someone, talk to them about how you actually feel about all this, cuz that's what we need. Actual fucking conversation about this shit. At least, with some people, not everyone is worth having conversation with. I'm not helping here. I'm really not helping here. I'll get off my fucking soapbox and I'll just say happy pride. Sorry I made it so fucking bitter. Um but I, for some reason, couldn't move on with my life until I uploaded this, so didn't come out like I wanted or expected or hoped, but I hope it was a decent listen, question mark, if you cared. Yeah, I know it's kind of the end of the month, but I hope you enjoy the rest of it. Uh, bye.